Hey everybody, it is Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and this is a very exciting day because I'm going to show you step by step how you can paint this green valley with a gorgeous sky reflected in a river. This was a really great lesson about green on green, about how to get water reflections, about how to create a natural world and get a lot of dimensionality. We even at the end had a little extra, I don't know, zhuzh that we decided to do thanks to John. On the mic is my husband, John.
Hello.
He helps me bring you these lessons, especially every day as we are in April, by making sure that whatever step I'm explaining, whatever technique I'm demonstrating, whatever color I'm mixing, you can really see. He makes sure that the camera is on the palette or it's on the brush and you're able to understand visually, verbally, both the techniques. Now, also to help you do these lessons, because they are more ambitious, if you check the description below, there is a link to the website, and on the website is a written out step-by-step mini book that you can download and use to help you with the video as you go along. So you have both types of learning accessible to you. There's also traceables, there's also grids, and there's instructions on how to use either in the mini book if those are what you're more comfortable doing. This is part of a 30-day daily painting program that I created called Acrylic April. This year we are studying water in landscape, which has been a big project. And because it's so big, I do want to remind you guys, if you're doing the challenge, whether you're doing it in April or whether you're doing it in August or whenever you tend to do it, remember that if you've got to break a video down into multiple days, because my stamina for painting could be different than your stamina for painting. And you may be like, yeah, I'm good for an hour a day and that's all I can do. Then break it down to that, because I'd much prefer you complete than put a lot of pressure on yourself. If you just came in because you thought, that's a pretty painting and maybe this lady will teach me how to paint it, I absolutely will teach you how to paint it. Definitely take advantage of all those resources because they do make a difference in the outcome, because what you can see and what I can explain to you, you can do and duplicate. You can learn this. Get your paint, get your brushes, come back and meet me at the easel right now. I'm going to show you how to paint this amazing landscape. So for today's project, I have an 8x8 stretch canvas set out. It has the wish or intention, something that I just hope and wish for you, which is that you have love in your life. And, if that's self-love or studio companion or a lot of family and friends, whatever that means to you, it makes you happy that you have it in your life, and that you also make room to love your art. The good paintings and the paintings that maybe you feel you could have done differently, that you create space to love both of those. So that is on our 8x8 surface. The colors of paint that we're using today are ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, phthalo green, Naples yellow light, sometimes also called titanate yellow, cad yellow medium, had red medium, quinacridone magenta, phthalo blue, dioxazine purple, and Mars black with titanium white in the center. The dioxazine purple can sometimes look like the Mars black, but it's actually a different color. If you don't have a color, like you don't have the Naples yellow, definitely just use what you have. If you want to know more about this color, I wrote a whole blog about it to make it much easier with exchanges and color exchanges and all the different paint companies that make it under a different name. But if that's like, no, that's not working for me, just try to get the value correct and don't worry so much about the color. Does that sound good, John?
That totally makes
sense.
sense.
Do you think they're prepared? I think they're prepared. I think you're prepared. I think you're ready. So let's get your materials and everything together, and I think we can begin with step one. Let's start this journey. So for step one, I'm going to use a watercolor pencil to sketch in the major lines of my landscape. And this is going to let me sort of block in and know where objects are. I'm not going to do a ground on today because of a lot of different color transitions.
Oh, that's interesting.
I just want to show you guys some different ways that you can get stuff done. So a lot of times I'm also trying to show you different techniques because it's very important to realize that there are many ways to paint a landscape. I'm going to come to the center of my surface and I'm going to make a little mark. This is where an inlet might come in. and a bit of my stream goes off here. And a lot of my stream is down here at this bottom edge, so I want to make sure that I have that. When I have this here, I'm going to come up a little bit above it and bring another little sort of random line back and come here. And this wonderful little embankment is pretty also random, and there'll be some fun stonework and stuff here up in the front that's great to do. I'm going to pull this over and up towards the right, and it will really kind of disappear behind like bushes and embankments and those types of things. There's a distant hill coming down. I like that it does to the valley. It's got a steeper little friend over here. We have a kind of upward purple mountain Majesty that happens here. And its little companion, it's also the purple mountain Majesty, which gets that there. And we're going to be putting our kind of sun focal here, which will be great because we're going to use a T-square to get a sense of how these reflections might come across the stream more accurately and how light comes down that valley. It's kind of a fun thing to do. Now, this is step 1, and we're going to go on to step 2. I'll make sure that in the step-by-step you have a nice kind of lined image in the reference so you know what we did here and how we did it. So in a landscape like this, I want to paint my sky in and kind of paint my stream in a very similar time scale so that the colors are very matchy-matchy, John. That way, because remember, there's a theme in this month, water is a mirror. It's so reflective. But it is, and that's how we're going to do that. I will use my number 12 Princeton round select. You could use just a round brush. You can use a small bright if you want to. I just want the soft kind of blending edges of this because I enjoy them very much. And I do think it makes that task easier. But first, I'm going to take my brush and kind of erase into my surface my watercolor words. Just so that they don't bleed up through the paint. I wish them for you. And you can see right here what I mean about this is watercolor, so it blends into the surface. I'm going to begin by getting my brush wet, not soaked, just damp, and load with a little white and Naples yellow light. If you don't have this yellow, you can use whatever yellow that you have. And I'm going to begin going over this mountain with this lovely light color, just brushing it in. Want to make sure that we've got lots of good, delicious color coming up.
I like the yellows.
I really do too. I'm going to get a little of my quinacridone over to my Naples yellow. And if I have to get a little white into it, I'm just making kind of a blended sky. I'm going to rinse out. And the reason that I chose to rinse out there and dry off is I had a pretty heavy load of paint on.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't going to give me the subtle blending that I wanted. So I just rethought the journey. And that'll happen. You'll be going, you're like, it's not where I'm going where I want it. Because I want this sort of pink blush of sky coming in here. And to do that, I will have to not have too much or too little paint on my brush. Sometimes when you're painting along, and you have a different tool, it will impact the result you get. I'm rinsing out again. I'm going to come here and grab some of my white and just make sure that I've got a nice blend coming from this area, going down. If I need to, I can come back with white again. This is a great way to subtly transition.
Oh, wow.
A fun little sky. Once I'm really resoundingly in the pink, I can go into the blues, and there'll be like a lavender band, and then it'll go into the blue.
And that helps prevent some of the green, doesn't it?
That's going to help prevent the green is creating this little barrier of pink. I
Neat.
don't have an orange. I'll come back with oranges over the top, but I won't pull an orange in the transition from the blue to the yellow.
Well, that makes sense.
Because otherwise, it's going to be a thing. Now I'm going to rinse out. I've rinsed out completely. The brush is without any pink or any other color. And I'm going to load up some of my phthalo blue. I'm going to come over the top of What Is This Mountain? I'm going to paint this in.
Is that the name of it? What is this mountain?
What is this mountain's name? What is this mountain?
It's like, who's on first? No, what is this mountain? That's the name of it. It's what is this mountain?
I really like this little space through here because it kind of goes lavender gray. And the important thing to remember is not to get stuck at this stage of the painting because you have layers of clouds that go over the top of it. So when you have a layer of clouds, I'm going to come back with a little extra blue here. It's going to be coming in over the top. You've got a lot of forgiveness about what is happening in that first order of the sky. Kind of bluing that up here. Haven't taken out all that. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of white to transition between the blue and the pink. And make that a nice, more subtle transition. I need to get my brush a bit wet to blend. I can do that as well. And remember, you can also use blending medium. If your paint is drying on you too fast and you're not getting the differences that you want, I'm back with my pink and white. You can always come back with a little blending medium. We've got just the beginning of that sort of sky going on there.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if that's true, I've got to sort of think about that here, and I'm going to be coming vertically, straight up and down with some of my colors. I'm going to come here to the edge. Vertically with a little bit of my yellow. Don't actually mind my watercolor getting in here at this stage because I'm just trying to make sure that I've got some of this.
Ooh. The sky reflection.
Sky reflection worked out now. So I'm very light pink, which is why I wiped off. I want a light pink. I really want this space in my stream to kind of fill that.
Bit of reflection.
Yeah. Coming back over here with the pink, and I'm brushing down. This isn't the only thing we're doing in the stream. This is just a great way to get this started. And sometimes when you're painting at home, this kind of reflection feels so mentally challenging. A little pink and yellow here and some white, that maybe you don't necessarily get it started. Adding some deeper white. Then we come back through with a very, very light blue. This doesn't mean that I won't have stones or other things under the water. This is just giving me a chance, or even lighter reflections that are going on. Coming here at the corner. Now I will put that landscape back in. You know, I might add some ripples and other effects. And even some darker color down here. But by putting this in now and getting that kind of wet into wet blending effect, I'm going to end up with a really cool result. If I need something, I can always come back with white. And I'm going to bring a little of this up here too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be the start of that stream. So let's call this a stage before I even put in any more clouds or anything up here. Because I think this is just a place to want to try to get to in the painting to get the rest of the effects of the painting, which will be super, super fun and really enjoyable. I'm going to want to add some more drama in the sky and create some interest kind of starting up here. So I'm going to grab a number 6 round brush. This is a hog bristle brush. It's just a little smaller than my pinky in size, and it's going to give me some nice cloud and sky effects. I'm going to get this brush wet, and I'm going to wipe out the extra water. I'm going to come here at first and get a very light kind of sky color. And I'm going to make little tiny comma brush strokes. I'm engaging and disengaging the sky area, which means I'm touching the brush to the canvas, and then I'm releasing the brush. Just a little bit of this titanium white and blue. And I'm going to put some of this a few places. You'll notice that I'm using my little cloudy shapes, which is such an irregular set of shapes.
Mm-hmm.
I may get a little of my dioxazine purple and my phthalo blue. And that's a great way to create some dark clouds. Maybe up here in the corner, wisping down as they do. Being dark gray cloudy clouds. I take out the beautiful blue I just put there. What was I doing? Sometimes it'll happen. You'll be like, why am I taking out that blue I like so much? You can always put it back though.
Mm-hmm.
These are just maybe a little stormier. We often forget that there's dark clouds and light clouds. Up here, make some interesting little cloud-like shapes.
I love how complex the layers of clouds can be in the sky.
A lot of fun, right? To me, a lot of fun. So you guys find them fun too? Now as I go forward, I'm going to get into my magenta. And if I need to, I can kind of rinse out. I want a little more magenta in that mix coming forward on the cloud, even before I put any of the red in there,
Mm-hmm.
which we will put in. Oh, that's very nice. Now I'm going to take some of my I'm going to go pink and white again. I'm going to have to dry before I get into my red. And the reason that I'm going to have to do that is that I don't want everything to gray out.
Oh, yeah. It's okay. We can do some movie magic and cut.
Cut? We can cut.
We
Are
can-
you sure?
We don't have to watch the hairdryer go.
So I do want some dark value and I do want some light value. I can always come back and get my very, very light sky blue color as well, kind of peeking up here. creating its own shape. And I think it's nice to come back and create those values. It is easy to get frustrated with sky, guys. I do understand it. But the only thing to do to get past it is to paint it.
Mm.
You just got to get in it and be like, I'm going to paint it.
Paint
I
a
don't
lot
care.
of it.
Does not stop me. Now, I'm about to put my fiery drama in here, so I'm going to dry it, and then we'll come back and put the drama.
Okay.
So now I'm going to put some drama in. Drama. I can really get into my dramatic colors. I'm going to get into my cad yellow when things are dry. But if I tried to, and you're going to see this in a minute because we're actually going to use this yellow and purple, who are complementary colors. We're going to put them together to gray out some cool distant mountains from some atmospheric perspective there. This drying then lets me not gray out these colors, and therefore we can get a slightly brighter pop of yellow, or
Well, that's really good.
right, that what we need. And then I can even come in and just get some bright orange. And you never think of this, but if you put a little bright orange underneath here, it creates the sense that these have lighting from underneath. Because the sun is coming up. You got to find the light on clouds. I'm just using the kind of cad red here. Even kind of under here. Just goes fast, doesn't it?
It really does.
And be like, no, I'll take some bright yellow there. Yellow, orange. Brighten it up. Just touching the bottom of that orange. Pretty fiery.
Mm-hmm.
Fiery. And I'll take some of the fire. Stay with me. Fire. And I'm going to definitely want to put that into some of what I've got going on here. Take that down into a nice. And I'm not saying that we won't come back and add some other elements, but it's just nice to include fire.
I like those reflections.
So
Now, it's important to keep those sort of streaks moving.
we're keeping them vertical.
They can't be wiggly, can they?
If the water was moving faster, they would be wiggly, but if the water is still, then they're going to be a little more diffused and not as wiggly.
That's interesting.
It really depends on the movement of the water. Some white here. Keep that watery, right? Pops of unexpected drama. All right. I feel like that's a step, and we're ready to get on to some distant mountains. Now we're going to add some Purple Mountain Majesty to this particular painting. I'm going to take my dioxazine purple and add a little bit of my Naples yellow light, and it's going to give me a very grayed out purple. This is a fun and easy way to get that distant mountain color. That's too much purple on my brush. That you see, and that's why we call them Purple Mountains Majesty. Sometimes in the distance they will look blue or purple.
Oh.
Grayed out little blue or purple. When the mountains are very far away, they're light, and then as they come forward, they might be darker. Now, this is still my number 6 round hog bristle brush. You could use any round you have.
Now here your brush strokes sort of imply the sides of the mountains.
You know, they may do. I think you may be giving me a lot of credit there, but they may also kind of imply the sides of those mountains a little bit. As I come forward, I might get a little more of the purple in here. And this mountain is still kind of purple gray from the yellow, but it's just a little bit darker. Just a little bit. It goes green at the base, but we'll brush that over in a second. So just work that in. I like that you're like, yes, your brush strokes are making it happen. Maybe.
Well, they
probably.
do. They sort of imply the...
I think that naturally, when you've been painting for a while, that you have a tendency to lay down paint with some unconscious factors in mind. Just from experience, I think that's why we call it muscle memory. You're like, oh yeah, if I brush downwards, and it's great because John will catch that and go, oh look, your brush strokes are implying the mountain. And then I got to be like reflective and go, oh no, the brush strokes are implying. But you can see there are 2 mountains that have been implied. I'm going to go ahead and take a little green and burnt sienna. And it kind of makes a very dark green. Smidge of white into it because far away mountain. I'm going to just say that perhaps here some things have grown. They do that sometimes, right? Very light, I'm applying it. And we just let that, I'm going to go with that. You can go into a darker green a little bit for the mountain that's up front more. Wow, it's like kind of getting the little rules of this.
Yeah.
As I come here, I might actually, now that I'm paying attention to it, I do change the directionality of my brush to sort of speak to the shape of that mountain. I might get a little more green and brown on my brush. And just do some darker value spaces. Just a little bit. Kind of speaking to the way foliage has a little personality.
Yeah.
It's got a little light dark. It's got a little bit of something, something. And kind of go down. Then I'm going to rinse out quite thoroughly, dry off my brush a good bit. And where this purple and yellow is, I'm going to add some white. Some. I'm going to come here and skip a little bit of that lighter value over that. And what that does is it just makes it feel like a distant landscape. Rinse, 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 rinse. And my last little touch that I really, really like to do is I like to take a little of my yellow over to my green and brown. Get this kind of like color here. And imply that somehow, like coming in the valley, maybe some of the light of the sunset, I can get into my orange even a little bit. Is perhaps here. Just little touches sometimes will make it seem, I'm going to rinse out of it. Sometimes little touches will make it seem like light is casting out. So if I want to add a little here, just sort of implying, oh, that sun is hitting some stuff, a little light color. Distant, but still lit by the sunset. Let's call that a step, and we'll come back and do the next level of sort of greenery that's going to fill in this sort of middle space coming forward. So make sure that you're paying attention to your body posture, especially if you're painting flat like I am, if you're not painting on an easel, because you can tendency to have to hunch over. So make sure you're like positioning your spine, thinking about that. Let's get our, again, same brush. There's really no point in changing it. You could just be using the same brush throughout. And I'm going to take my green and brown again, mix them together and get kind of a dark color. And I'm going to turn my surface. Really, I'm only turning it because I just want to have some control over it. And I'm going to paint back. Perhaps a thoughtful little bit of what could be some valley. I'm like here a bit as well, coming forward. So this is like a darker green. And I'm going to brush up and down right here. This will be almost like implying maybe a tree line. If it's transparent, you may need to do it twice. Sometimes green and brown can be transparent colors. And I definitely want to make sure that this is dark enough to represent the distant majesty that it is.
Yes.
And you can kind of see the transparency there. First, I'm just kind of getting that base of color. And I do think I will be served by the second value. So I'm going to dry it real quick and then put another quick coat. Once I've got that dry, I can come back with another quick coat. And this is just that all-important kind of coverage that sometimes we want, depth of color, that you can get if you take the time to do 2 coats. I am going to continue this sort of up and down rough stroke that implies bushes, distance, trees, landscapes, just stuff in general. We'll add highlights in a second on the top. But this, even this up-down stroking, I think definitely improves our chances of having what we're wanting. I'm going to mix a little more of my green and brown, and I'm going to get some of my cad yellow into it. The valley below is a bit greener.
Mm-hmm.
And let's begin here. Really need to work our little valley below. It's real fun how we pull the space, how we're going to pull the space from the 2 like little zones.
Yeah.
Into each other. I got to make sure this is just a sliver. You want to make sure it's a sliver. Little add yellow into that. I'm kind of rough because we've got some layers and textures to do here.
Mm-hmm.
So at this stage, there's nothing to really do.
Just fill in some of the block areas.
Yeah, we got to start getting in some of that area that's green, and we know it's going to be green, and we're like, it's green. What is it? It's green. Going to be different greens, and those different greens will make these feel like hills or bushes or different elements that we need.
That may be closer or farther away.
That may be closer or farther away. So there's just no point but to get the and you can see even as we start to frame in the stream,
Mm-hmm.
it looks a little reflecty streamy.
It really does.
It starts to have that. And those can be just, again, those can be so challenging to know where to go and where are they going to be and how's it going to go. And we still have highlights and things to do. I'm going to grab some of my brown and black here. Right back here, coming back, I'm going to bring up a little brown black edge to this.
Yeah.
And then along here. And I know I've got upward plants coming here, so that's why I'm leaving that room to have that peeking out. A lot of it disappears, which is maybe why I wasn't putting my most concerned brush strokes there. I'm going to bring some of the earth in here. Earth.
Little shadowy bank.
Well, you know, what happens with this sort of loamy ground is that it tends to fall and erode along the stream or river because the river swells. And so things are never static, and you've got to kind of capture that fact that this rich, dark earth will be exposed. Kind of fun to put in. So I've got a little bit of this dark in the dark of the canvas. There's some brown and black paint. We can talk about a little bit of a peninsula, second one here coming in. And again, as we put in these shadows, it just goes stream. It's like that dog from Up where it's like squirrel. This is like stream. But it is. Which I really, really like. Now I'm also going to take this time to put in some rock.
Ooh. Some little rock guys hiding in there.
They peek up and they do their little thing, and you want to have some of them. I'll put in some smaller dots with like a detail brush, but I just want to get some of my bigger rocks so that we can talk about the way that the water tends to flow around it, because the water does some very specific things with rocks. We'll even talk a bit about a little shadow of rock there. All right. That was a lot to do and think about. So what you've done is you put in your dark values here in the distant hills, and you've started to green in the green valley, and you've added some shadows and kind of created or crafted some shape to your stream. So really, for anything to happen next, you want to find yourself right about here at this step before moving on. Doesn't have to be perfect. Notice that I was very like rock, 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 land, 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 grass, grass, grass. So it's just about it being here, not about it being perfect. So for our valley to take shape, we need to really capture that there's this tree line. That will be a deeper value, that there's these rolling hills, maybe light coming down the valley, maybe a little bit of flowers or something. You know, as you go, you can really play with a lot of stuff, but it's really about capturing the greens and learning to paint many, many greens, for which, I mean, really honestly, we have a few greens here, but with green, it's always like a monochromatic process. It's about what's lighter and what's darker to get the separation of them. Though you can add some orange or some brown or different things on occasion to really get some interest going. I'm going to take a little of the yellow into this, phthalo green and burnt sienna. I have a number 8 Cambridge Bright hog bristle brush, and I'm choosing that because I like its roughness. I want it to be rough. I'm going to come into the this little central area, and I will definitely kind of lighten that right here. And I'm going to do this up and down little kind of brush stroke. Still pretty rough. Sometimes I might get a little more brown over into my yellow green.
Mm-hmm.
And come here and try to speak to the fact that maybe that some of the grass is a little dried out. Because we're creating distant value. Come forward, and I might get a little of my yellow in there and also my white into that brown mix.
Mm-hmm.
And let's come over here. To this part of the valley. I'm going to sweep that up. And I want to tuck into the trees. See how it starts to just shape everything?
Mm-hmm.
It's really just, you gotta find your shape. You gotta find your green and get into your green and have some different values of green. Really nothing to do but that. I added some more yellow there, but I don't want to take out all my little patches of earth. You can also get more phthalo into it. Perhaps there's something happening there. You want to just shape things out. Kind of more of a shaded run. And then, you can also get into your Naples yellow, which is an interesting way to lighten something. Trying to create valley. We've got a lot of bushes and things here, so the valley doesn't actually go up to the pond line as it looks right now. There are land masses that do break it up, but for the purposes of where we're at, I'm going to grab a little white into that yellow-green mix. Back and forth. I'm kind of sweeping up in a curve.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to find the valley. Get a little playful with it. So just lightening that little curve down is always an important thing. Let's come into the trees a bit. And I want to make sure that I really wipe off my brush. I don't want a lot of moisture on it. And I'm going to get into my dark green and brown. And we're going to capture some highlights in the trees. And I'm turning my canvas just so I have an easier time doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Contrast is a big deal to sort of capture those little landscape spaces. And it only works if you have good shadow. If I lose too much, I can come back with a little of my green. Like that's just too bright, so that pulls it too far forward, right? So I come back with a little of my green brown. And blend that back in. Get the highlights going again there. There's a little bit. So you just want to capture like the hints of something at the top of maybe a line of trees. And that's why sometimes I like the rough brush because it does that really well.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I may come back with a darker value, kind of add a shadow so that there's a bit of shading on the hill. Lots of yellow. And then some white. Green. Just having the distant little valleys. I'm going to switch to my round.
Okay.
Because I want that shape, right? Because that's going to give me some more focused color differentials. And I'm going to add a lot more yellow into my green. I'm going to get some white into it. And I'm going to try to lighten. The reason I'm lightening this value is I need contrast to create form and shape. Some yellow coming down the valley.
Mm-hmm.
Put out more yellow paint on my palette.
Yeah.
Because you're going to go through a lot of green and yellow. And you can also make greens with your cad yellow and your phthalo blue, your cad yellow and your black, and your cad yellow and your ultramarine. You're not just stuck here. You have lots of options. Come back with some of that. I might come along with some green right along this edge here.
Yep.
Just pure phthalo green. Right, where you put that little highlight, it changes the shape of that space. Just dancing back and forth. Maybe tap up and down. So these are sort of implied different little plants or flowers or something.
Mm-hmm.
There is some green in it, but they're far away. They wouldn't be a very bright color. And back into the green with the white. So where you put a lighter color would be the top of the hill, right? Where things are in the light. And where the shadows are is maybe where their hill is like breaking light or blocking light. But even though it's green on green on green, you're still trying to create those shapes of hills and light and everything coming down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the last thing that I'm going to want to do here, just for fun, just because it's enjoyable, is I'm going to take a little bit of my cad yellow in Cad Red just on the toe of my brush. And I will go ahead and like kind of, I want to just extend that little cloud a bit. Is that fussy? Yes, it is. But I do want to do it, so I'm gonna. We're gonna just bring some orange. Just little touches of it. I've got to be super delicate. I don't want big globs. And I want it to sort of zigzag back and forth. Sometimes you can have a little more orange in it. Now some of this is going to be behind a bush. But it can be nice, I feel. I'm just making sure that.
That's one of the important things is sometimes you have to fully paint something in so that you can paint something in front of it. And
It can really help sometimes because, you know, you can always go back and paint it, but it can be hard to hit some small spaces. So,
and it's hard to, like, when you can move the brush to make that full stroke to imply like that little, the valley zigzagging, that could be hard if you had a bush in front of it.
it could be real hard. Kiss the mountains with a little bit of the sunset color now that they're a little more dry. Just pulls it down. And just straight yellow on there. You know, even exaggerate more. There. And that's just a little bit of an exaggerated distant valley. Now we
Mm-hmm.
can start working on the stream and stuff that's up here in this zone.
Multi-quarter is going.
So if you're having trouble with this green on green on green, when you go to the website and you look at the mini book and you look at the resources, there's also something called a practice page. And the practice page is something you can print out and then color mix and try to match the reference and also practice light values and dark values. So if this is challenging, don't just get frustrated and give up. Go, oh, okay, I just need to work on mixing different values of green so that I can get these subtle differences because this can be, when you're new in painting, that can be super frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to be alternating between my rough brushes and my number 4 round through here. So I'll be going through my number 4 round synthetic, which is for my Art Sherpa line, and the 2 hogs. And that's because I'm going to want crisp lines and fluffy lines. And so that's why I would change that up. I'm going to get this brush wet. I am going to change my water at this stage because it's a little bit dirty. And I'm going to start creating some shadows or shading on the water. I'll put out glazing medium because I want to do this in a glaze. And what that means is I'm going to do a thin, transparent value color. I'm going to take my phthalo blue over to my glazing medium. And I'm going to come along this edge.
Ooh.
And I'm going to glaze. A little bit of this, a darker blue. And then I'm going to come across here and also sort of glaze. So some of this is bright, but you can see some of it is a little bit darker. That creates a little bit of shadow. I like that.
Hmm.
Shadows are important. I'm also going to come here and glaze just under what is this embankment. Pretty nice thing to do. And I'm going to add some little ripple glazes. And what that means is these are little motions in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll give them highlights and all the things that you need to do. This is about maybe something is underneath that's causing that. The little ripples in the water are important.
Yeah. They They imply that motion.
They really do. Objects like rocks and things, they cause those. And a little ripple there. And a little ripple there. It's okay to have a few ripples coming different places through the stream because it would absolutely have a ripple.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to get a little of my white and phthalo blue, but quite light. Make sure where these ripples are happening, I'm adding some highlights to them. And we kind of, got familiar with this
Yeah.
idea. Earlier on. I'm going to also come across here. I'm going to start doing some cross values. So I'm going to get my pink, but I need it to be super light. We have some very light values that will come across. Not light enough.
Mm.
Maybe I'll get back into my round here for a second, just for its diffused personality. It's so diffused. And also because I'm really wanting to make some very light reflections. I mean, there are these bright, bright moments, but we do want some of this to be light.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get some of my pink, just as light as I can make it. Make sure that we are come across here with the whites. We did this a bit with the moon. I have a similar thing that we have going on. Here we go. And that does kind of lighten it up.
Mm.
What do you think?
I think it's great.
Oh, you're always so encouraging.
Always like how it comes together.
I'm going to just lighten this. This is, again, my number 12 round blender, and I'm just wanting to make sure that we've got a nice value going. Okay. Now, once that's there, I can come back here. There's also, it's a lot darker up front. I'm going to grab a little of my black and blue and my glazing medium. And I'm going to glaze up a bit of a shadow in this water here. Will come up along the embankment as well. The water is thinner and it's more shaded. We're going to have lots of little river stones and things.
Oh, yeah.
Happening under here. So we got to make this a little bit darker as if the water got thinner as it came around the bend. And I really, really, really like the glazing medium for this.
Mm-hmm.
Just very, very, very much. And come along here. Sort of shade that. Every time you shade a stream or you really like talk about values or reflections, it helps that stream, I feel like, come into being. And a little shadow there along that embankment. So I find that it's just super nice to have that. I'm going to bring some little lines down. This will represent maybe some of the little grasses or things. And we'll piece out very specific plant work, but it's just nice to do this here. Look at that. I went a whole different brush than I predicted. That's the reason it's good to do the mini books, because like we do those after, so like my predictions, if they're off, doesn't matter. I may come put those highlights back and maybe even those shadows back, because I feel like in the light of the glaze they will be even more. Interesting. If you get too much black on your brush like I did there, rinse out and I come back with the glazing medium and it's no problem. So once I have that kind of valued a little more, then if I come back with my blue, and I want to speak to maybe a series of ripples that happen through there, or I want to come here and speak to a series of ripples that are maybe happening there. Making little delineations. Now let's add those highlights back in, and I think we're going to find that they're just much more significantly interesting. There we go. Just needed to improve the values, contrast between what we were saying. And a little bit of rough water right here. Little stones, little bits of highlight and turn and things, because they happen. Little highlight right there. See how the highlights move the water?
It really does. I love the highlights. I say that all the time, but
you do say it all the time, but it's super, super duper duper true. All right. Lastly, before we stop, I'm going to make some different stones. I'm going to take a little black and brown and other little colors, and we're going to make underneath the water a little bit of perhaps implied river stones. And here we were going to make sure that this embankment seemed more shallow and delicate. I can come in and get a little of my orange and brown and make maybe some different little river stones here. These are just little rocks that are implied under the water. They're not in any way bright.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that there's more happening here. Little river rocks. A little of my gray and brown.
Mm-hmm.
And on the top, highlights. What do we remember from our stones on the fall? We should have some very important references for those.
Mm-hmm.
About how the highlights and the shadows work for those. Yeah, we get the little light on the river stones.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I see them.
Do you see it? Do you see?
I'm looking at them right now.
I'm just using my number 4 round so that I have a little control over what's going on. Up here on these upper edges, maybe I highlighted a little more. I'm in black, brown, and white for my gray. Trying to make sure that we've got good above the ground and below the ground kind of. Now, if we have nice highlights on the stones, we really have to have some exaggerated shadows. I'm going to get right into my black. And I'm even going to kind of cast back a shadow a bit. It's not just that the rock is dark at the water, it's that it casts quite a bit of a shadow back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to also help it feel like a rock out of a stream in kind of like this time of day. It's a difficult time of day sometimes to paint because of those factors.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to find that. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of my yellow and some of my sunset colors. Just kiss the rocks a little bit with some sunset color. A little. Just nice. Just catches their little edge.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's all done. So let's start filling in our world. I'm going to get back into some scruffy brush for a minute. I'm going to get my number 8 Cambridge, which is the hog brush. And let's make some plants and some things that could be going on. I'm going to take my ultramarine blue and my phthalo green, and I'm going to kind of stroke up a little bit here, creating a rough edge of what could be an embankment. Kind of fun area. I'm also going to come here and add some of this. I want it to be fairly covering, so doing that there. And then let's also really speak to that again. If I need to, I'll come back with a little bit of very dark. Like if I have to come back with even black into it underneath here for the value, I will. You know, just making that rough, distant, thoughtful. And as I said, there's a lot happening here along this embankment.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were going to be painting over a bit some of that yellow that we had. There's these little plants that are all along here. Creating that shadow. And I would like it to have a deep, deep value. You can use any brush you have. I just want rough strokes. What I'm trying to get is just very rough kind of strokes. Between these areas, I'm going to take a little green and brown, like I have been, and a little yellow. I'm going to fill that in a bit with that green and yellow. And I might even get a lot more green and yellow going in here. But I just want those spaces to exist. And back and forth. I'm coming in. Maybe take some of the phthalo green and tap it in there. Applying some rough things afoot. And another layer that I'm going to be doing here. This will be kind of a shorter grass. It will have a dark area at the embankment. And I think it's just nice to get this sort of shaded out. So I want a dark area right here at the embankment. Little phthalo green and a little ultramarine blue. I'm going to tap my brush up and down. I'm kind of creating little clusters that will run along here. I'm going to make sure that it's quite dark, sort of all along here. I want that shadow to come back further. Further on the hill. Okay. So now we've really created some dramatic deep lighting. I can switch to either an angle or a round. I'm going to be doing an angle on some of the water. But right now I'm going to get into the round because I want to speak to some more thoughtful little bits of grass and things. I'm going to get into my green and yellow. Pull to some of these here.
You're just working on the very tippy toe of the brush?
Tippy toe of the brush. And I don't want to take out all my shadow because I need it. I need that shadow. Come here and make a little bit of a highlight on some of these blades. With a little green and yellow added into them. Not everything, just some of it. Because you want them to appear like they've caught some light. If you need to come back into their dark color, you can do that. Give them shading at the plant base. always come forward, tapping up and down. And that makes kind of a different little texture into the ground. Maybe add a little brown into it.
Yep.
I think that's sort of fun. Come along here with a little bit of black. This is very dark. Come here and kind of refine some of that silhouetted grass that we had. See, it's real dark there, so that helps it. And it's not a silhouette in the black silhouette that we sometimes do. It's a silhouette in a value. And then perhaps also here, creating that refined space. I can always deepen a part of this, like saying, okay, there's like maybe a little deep area going forward. You know, and those dark areas really help. Don't want to take out their full dark areas, but I can add some highlights in there to show that they are multidimensional. Coming forward here, I'm going to get a little of my green and yellow together. And what I would say is actually to make this easier, because this lighting is so extreme, try this trick. We're going to get a little black. Not something we often do, but we are here. You can see I'm just making a little black detailed grassy edge. You guys remember Water is a Mirror?
Oh, yeah.
Now all we have to do is remember to make the reflection be greater than or less than. We know that from Water is a Mirror. Once I get those generally down, I can kind of refine them. You know, I can come in then with this really cool trick where I take a little phthalo blue. And it sort of gives a diffused shadow to the blend, which is really cool and super crazy nice looking. Now, dry this. Let's bring this whole embankment just to life now. Green and yellow. We're going to make some really nice, bright, healthy green blades of grass. I need to get white involved in it to lighten it up enough because I need it to have contrast. Sometimes the black helps us get the highlights to show. Where it might normally be a little challenging. And therefore put context into what we're doing. Going to add some little detailing here. And I may even be able to get into my rough number 6 round. Add some highlights in this way. And remember with green, I will always highlight first with yellow. I'll lighten it first with yellow before I add white. Otherwise it goes mint.
Huh, that's a good tip.
Unless you want mint, and then that's how you get mint.
How do you do that?
So if I want to lighten this green, I'm going to go yellow first before I ever pull any white into it.
Ah.
That's how I keep it out of the mint. We're almost done with this side, which I think looks pretty spectacular.
That does.
I'm going to go into my black and get a little white. We're going to kind of make a gray. And add a bit of gray coming in that reflection. That is that green on green on green side. Let's call that one side, and then we're going to do this other side. So I'm going to come over here and continue to be kind of resolving and working this piece out. I am going to do an interesting thing. I'm going to take my green over to my Doc's purple. And I'm going to bring it up into some of this green with my number 6 round. That's the hog. And I'm going to come along this distant embankment. I'm creating a very deep series of shadows and zones. Pretty powerful stuff. We really, really want this side to have the drama. Now I'm going to rinse this out and get my phthalo blue and glazing medium again, and if I have to, a little of my black. And I'm going to make sure that along this side of the stream is a bit darker. Wiggle that out some.
Oh, yeah.
So just improving that shadow.
It really does.
Isn't it better? I'm going to come in here and I'm going to try to do it with this round, but if it doesn't work, I will use another. I'm going to take a little of my white into my green and yellow here, and you can see it goes a little more mint. I really need it to be a good light value. I'm going to just tap. This is instead of the grass stroke, right? I have to get up into my Naples yellow light and even more white. Just tapping and pulling. A little more yellow. Changing up those greens. So that's like a little distant kind of bush texture. I think I want a harder edge with it. So I'm going to come in with a little yellow and some more white. And maybe make some details that are distant and loose, but I think will help it feel more like the leaves. See how I'm just tapping?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find those little leaves. I just want them to show up as more leaves than blades of grass. So on top of that, we're painting these values, we want to make sure that we have some textures that kind of sometimes imply what could be going on. I always get into my green, deepen things where it would help me.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we have a lot of grasses. So we're going to come back and get a lot of grasses in here.
This is a good one to get grass practice because
this is a great grass and landscape practice one because you're learning how to create different textures.
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving my canvas so I have better access, and I'm using my detail brush so that I can have sharp edges that are distinctly different than the soft edges around them. Yeah, that creates kind of a distant grass-like shape around back over there. Little highlight. You can always get into my brown and kind of tap in a little bit of earth. All right, there's some earth and stuff happening here. And then all I've got to do is finish this upward section here. So I'm going to kind of maybe get into this number 8 Cambridge.
Okay.
Make short little brush strokes, and I'm going to vary the greens. Because this is more just short little grasses. And I do want it to come up over this embankment with these rough little edges. I can even go into my brown a bit to show some temperament to the grass there. The grass has some temperamental grass. And it can be in the black and green even.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of creating some shading. I want more shading. I don't want too many light colors on my brush if I'm trying to shade, so I got to pull that out. And this is that sort of embankment where the grass is like, where it's fallen away. And then we'll have to put some, let me go back and forth here, darken that. So there we go. That's got that rough edge that we're looking for. Go ahead and pull a little yellow and white into your green here. And highlight some of this. See how we're highlighting some of it?
Yeah.
So it's like some sunlight caught it. That helps imply that short grass gets caught by sunlight. We're actually nearly done, guys. There's not that much left to do.
Looks really good.
It's looking good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Looks good. So here we've got some interesting stuff to do. We're going to take our black, brown, and white. And we're going to start implying, and we'll need to give them highlights, these little rocks. These are here on the edge. They need to be different sizes and shapes. We'll let those have a little think there. And you can give them more brown if you want. Some of them, but they're pretty river stony. And then here at the grass, we're going to do some fun stuff. We're going to make some bright grass.
Ooh.
That maybe falls down. See, it kind of breaks into that area where it's not so neat and tidy there. Let's get some really light grass going. You can kind of shade it with some. This is a little longer, so it pulls the edge of that embankment. I want to change its direction a few places. I don't want to be too tidy with it. Don't be tidy. Be a messy, messy, messy grass painter. But it's important, right? And we can put some forward over there. And I think that's fun to add these little bits of grass between the stones. Just something to think about, right? That the stones have, stuff growing between them. On the water, let's make sure we've got a nice little shadow that mimics that grass coming out over the edge. And doesn't that shadow just make an amazing difference?
It really does. All the little rocks.
Deep little shadow under some of these little rocks. And then we're going to just do one more little shade of gray in the brown and white and gray. Just something lighter. Just to capture some light on some of the rocks. Because they would have it. Guess what?
What's
we
that?
have one last thing to do. We have one last thing to do, and I'm not going to break it up into its own step because it's a pretty small, minor thing.
Okay.
We're going to take a little yellow, just a small amount, and we've got our white, and we're going to do some reflections. This is a 1/2 inch angle brush, and I just like it for very crisp edges and lines.
Yeah.
You could use a bright, a good little tiny bright, something in the 4 or 6 range. You could use a very sharp bright. I just want a sharp brush. I'm going to take a little white and my yellow, and I'm going to load to the left side of the brush.
Wow.
I'm going to try to give us some
yellow highlights in the water.
Yeah. But they're sharp. See how they're very sharp?
Oh, yeah.
Just trying to make sure these are level. That's the big thing. There we go.
Wow.
And that sort of just broke up some of those long highlights a little bit and gave it a little bit of that glow that you would want. I think we did it.
I think it looks amazing. You just got to sign it now.
We just got to sign it. If I know where I put my signing brush, I'm going to use this. I'm going to go ahead and in this one particular case, use black. And that's just because down here at the edge, that won't seem so extreme. I'm just using a one detail brush because I don't know where my number one monogram liner is.
That's all right. That seems to be working okay.
It does its job. I like the monogram liner better. But I just got to get my moniker in there in some way. Maybe that's a little bit darker than I like. I don't like it.
Well, add highlights. Look at that. You can do that with your signature. You just
There's so much going on this one, especially up here at the front. I'm gonna.
Yeah, that's where all the little highlights and the action.
I just don't want to put the signature there.
No, you don't have to. Maybe you could put it in the shore or in the grasses or in the sky.
I
or
might be
under.
able to get away with it here.
You could put your initials on a rock.
I just sometimes I just really, really don't want the whole painting.
This is
This
interesting.
is like to an edge painting, so where to put my signature? I have a weird idea.
You could put it on the left in the rocks.
So many opinions on signatures, but
There's
yeah.
so many. And thoughts on it too. Oh, that looks nice.
I like this better.
Yeah.
It's still there, but it's not so
Yeah.
disrupt the whole piece. All right. We did it. So looking at this piece, I realized that I have an opportunity to add some zhuzh. So I'm going to put some highlights in, some like extra dynamic highlights. I'm going to pull out my white fluid paint like I like to do. And I am going to find that monogram liner wherever it got off to. Oh, here's another version of it. This is also a monogram liner. So I'm going to use this monogram liner and I'm going to create some really interesting highlights on here with white fluid paint. And the first thing I'm going to do is I might come along my rocks. And add a little bit of highlight there.
Oh yeah, just along that little edge.
The way morning sometimes can outline things.
That's great.
Maybe add some highlights to this water. This is just a big ambitious year, guys. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, water is a complex subject matter and it has many layers. And, getting those last little highlights sometimes in is part of that.
And I think what happens too is like sometimes you want to not have the video overwhelm everybody, but then you want to make sure that everybody knows how to paint everything.
Yep.
And creating the right highlights in the right spaces. And there's a bunch of places for them here that could just take this over the top. Like even those ripples, isn't that completely?
It really just does. It brings the water to life. It makes it just start dancing around in the light.
And then I can really kind of show the flow of the stream.
Mm-hmm.
Where you just get little touches of stuff that happen around the rock. And that really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And also sometimes these little ripples just really show you the path of the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you halo some of the grass, you get a big, big kind of effect. So let's come up here. Let's just do the work, right? We're learning how to do the do.
Do the do.
We got to do the do. There's nothing to do now but the do. And adding these little highlights of sparkling, it just, look at that.
Wow.
It just makes
such a difference.
It really does. And it'll make your piece like kind of extra.
Mm-hmm.
You want your piece to be extra, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Also, if you come through here and do this, like it makes it seem like the water is turned around the bend. And then if you go into your yellow green with your white, and you make an exceedingly light yellow green, you know how I like to halo the clouds?
Yeah.
You can show that these bushes have a halo and sometimes help them kind of come to life. And then you can put a little bit of halo maybe on some distant grass. You want it to just be nice yellow green. Which can help those far off blades really find themselves.
Mm.
I sometimes find myself in a painting going, you know, if we just went a little longer, we'd be there.
That's just looking great, though.
This particular type of monogram liner is called an ultra round.
Mm-hmm.
So again, what you want is it's a very long length out with a very fine tip is how you get this. And even just catching the edges of that
Oh, yeah.
grass there
Makes them all pop in the sunlight.
makes them all pop in the sunlight in the same way that the rocks can pop. We have just a little kit of lines and grass now coming down. And even those edge grasses,
Mm-hmm.
there's just always some extra that you can put into anything.
That's a nice little bit of extra.
It just, and I want you. This extra was brought to you by John. He was like, "Is there any extra?" And I was like, "I don't know. They're probably pretty tired." And he's like, "No, they're gonna want the extra." So if you wanted the extra, it was John who was like, "Extra."
Sometimes.
And I've got my yellow over here. So you can really get into the yellow. And it can make a difference. Goodness gracious. Aren't we almost super glad we did that?
Mm-hmm.
Just creating those little highlights to everything.
Makes a big difference there.
Let's just even talk about the micro ripples that happen. There we go. This water is in motion. This stream is fantastic. I love it. All right. I'm glad we went the... Oh, darn it.
What's that?
I see an extra that I can do here, too.
One more. Oh, wow. Yeah. The clouds. We forgot. The silver lining in the clouds.
If you silver line the clouds, sometimes it can take your sky to that space, or if you had trouble getting your clouds in there by taking this extra step, you can bring the painting to that next place. Oftentimes, I like to sit with a painting for a period of time so that I have a chance to sort of take it in, and I will, as I work, oftentimes sort of discover these little intense moments that could have been taken advantage of and brought to bear. And on this purple kind of orange sky, this is really rather nice little touch, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so did we extra enough? I don't know, because there's always extra, guys. You can always extra. I don't think we want to white line the mountains.
Well, that gives people an idea, though, what they're,
Yeah. Now, if you want the grass to look like it's got dew, I have to get it so fine that it doesn't. See, now you got me extraing.
That's always good to extra.
Tiny little white dots in the grass will make it look like there's some dew. I was going to wait to tell you that on Grass Quest, but that is my Twix. However you want to make it look like grass has dew. Kind of like the bear.
Yeah.
Similar deal.
Just little dots here and there.
Yeah, a few little dots will make it seem like there's a little dew in the grass. Maybe it's too much extra. I don't know. Enjoy. That's what we did today. I know this is an ambitious year. I know we're asking you guys to take on a lot. Remember, it's okay if April goes into May. I'd much rather you understand the concepts and be able to up your water game so that you can paint the water. I know you guys are always asking me how to paint. I'm like basing this off of the trip photos you guys post in group. Where you're like, how would I paint this picture? I'm just wanting you to come out of this month going, yeah, I totally know how to paint that picture. Got it. And really feel like you could do that from your own life, from your own world. If you see a sky, you're like, yeah, I can paint that sky. If you see a stream, you're like, I can paint that stream. That's the feeling I'm hoping that you guys get after this. This was quite a beautiful painting. And I don't think we've ever done anything like it. Even Green World wasn't like this on the channel. So this was really quite a nice piece. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And I want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.